What's good, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Over Quota. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review if you haven't already. And like always, the J. David Group, which is my company, is sponsoring this podcast. My company helps high-growth software companies recruit top software sales leaders and salespeople. Go to the jdavidgroup.com to learn more. Now, my guest today is Shawns Mulvey, somebody that I've known for, I don't know, easily 10 years, probably more than that.
Sure.
Right. He's the Regional Vice President of Sales at Dun and Bradstreet, where he leads a team of pre-sales, sales, and client services people who focus on their MDR product. And Shawn will tell us about that in a minute. But essentially, the MDR product there helps brands market to educators and teachers across the country. Shawn, good to see you and welcome to Over Quota.
Thanks, Jay. Great to see you.
So let's just start with what I just ended with. Give us a little bit of a sense of the your team there at Dun and Bradstreet and the MDR product that you support.
Sure. So earlier in the year, I moved over to our MDR division. Dun and Bradstreet has the world's largest business-to-business database out there, and one of our divisions of our company is MDR, where we solely focus on educational data. So if you're an organization that wants to market, attract, and target schools, colleges, universities, we are that data source for you.
Got it.
And it's a really good team spread out across the country. Been doing it for a long time. And I was asked in March of this year, so perfect COVID timing with everything, to join and to lead the sales team for MDR.
All right, so that brings me to the next question. Well, let's do this before I actually get into the next question. Walk us back a little bit, right? Give me the Shawns Mulvey backstory, going back to when you first got into sales, coming out of college, moving into management, and some of the things that you've done along the way. And then I want to drill down into a couple of those.
It's funny, right? You go to college and never think you're going to be in sales, and then all of a sudden you graduate and you are in sales. I was fortunate enough to graduate and join a company out of Michigan that actually had a sales management training program. So they brought, I think, 10 or 11 of us after graduation to Michigan and spent a whole summer not only learning sales, but eventually if you got into sales leadership, how should you act and work with other people, especially at a young age. Then you're probably going to be managing at some point people older than you. And right from that start, that's when I realized at some point I wanted to get into sales management. And I've been.
Go ahead, continue.
And I was just going to say, and I've been, and that's really since then, that's exactly what I've been doing, one form or another, since '94, some type of sales leadership roles.
What was it about that experience, that early experience, that got you so interested and focused on that's what you want to do as far as managing?
I graduated from Notre Dame and I had all the good business classes, but we never really spoke about those. And I know they do it now, but those personal skills you really need on how to interact with people, how to communicate with people, right? You can take the textbook class on marketing or economics or any of those classes, but you don't really learn at that time about how do you motivate, how do you listen, how do you guide, how do you coach, how do you deal with someone who's unfortunately maybe not the right fit for your sales role. And so just as I learned more and more about it and kind of that whole human element of it, I just have always loved it. It's, as we all know, it's certainly stressful at times, but I totally love our industry.
I was looking at your LinkedIn profile before, in preparation for this call, and one thing that I noticed, there were some common threads. One thing that stuck out is that you're consistently, people talk about a proven track record of success, and that's clearly evident in your experience, right? And this might not, I guess maybe to our dads and maybe our dads, maybe this isn't something that stands out, but for me it does. I mean, since 1994, you've only worked for like I think 1994, I think it's like 8 companies, which is like, what is that, like 26 years, which is so unusual these days, given, again, the kinds of companies that you work for, right? Like these startup companies that grow, they get acquired. I noticed a couple of times that you've either been asked to revamp and essentially improve process that already is existing, or to start something that hadn't existed, but then you've been able to achieve and to exceed goals. And I guess the question that I have for you after all that is, what does Sean Mulvey do, or have you done over the years that's really enabled you to be consistent no matter where you've gone, and whether it's an individual contributor or a manager or leadership role, you've been able to exceed expectations?
No, thank you for that. I've certainly changed, right? I've certainly taken a lot of classes and read books and so forth. Like for example, Dun and Bradstreet just recently invested all of us into a program called value selling. And it was excellent. And it's just something you just need, because you just kind of need to be sharpened every year or two. But to me, really simply, Jay, I've always looked at sales as a process, right? It's so easy to get caught up on emotion. Hey, wow, this could be a great lead. That's a huge company. It's a Fortune 50 company. And I bet you they have a ton of budget. And I bet you I can convince them to buy my goods or services or software or SaaS application. And you can't operate that way. You have to have a really good sales methodology that starts with discovery, and then you're constantly throughout your sales cycle doing discovery, determine, does this make sense for me to chase at this time? If it makes sense, absolutely go after it hard. If it doesn't make sense, don't. And I think so many people don't do good enough discovery in the beginning, chase really bad deals, that they've wasted so much time and energy where they could have focused on other things. So to answer your question, I think what I've always tried to do, especially in the last 10 plus years, is to make sure we have a good methodology of success. Now, we're certainly going to lose deals, but let's just try to reduce that amount.
How do you go about, what's the decision-making process as it pertains to, first of all, what's a good deal to chase and what's not a good deal to chase? But then also, even when you talk about the methodology within the sales process, right? Like, how do you know, especially if you're, let's say, for instance, if you're taking over a sales team or you're revamping a sales team, how do you know which direction to go in? Which methodology is best for either the product, the market, the team? Speaking of the team, in the process, which do you evaluate first? Do you evaluate the team? Do you evaluate the process? Like, how does that all work?
So I've always looked at myself as, my job really is just as a coach,
Okay.
right? I just try to every single day make each team member better. And that could be putting fires out for them, or helping them on a demonstration, or helping them on a contract. Whatever I can do, that's, at the end of the day, that's what I should be focused on. So what I try to do is understand that each salesperson, again, you can't have the cliche that all salespeople are alike, because they're not. Some have really good strengths in discovery, but they might not close as well. Other people are phenomenal closers and give great presentations. They just need help getting more opportunities. And some are in between. So you really have to start learning your team, or like, for example, not only at an MDR do I want to start learning the team, but also the sales leaders in my team, to really understand their strengths and weaknesses. And therefore, as a coach, how can I help them? How can I make their strengths even stronger and just improve any of the weaknesses that they might have? So I usually try to always start with the people.
And then when you're doing that, when you're evaluating the people within that, are you looking at skills? Are you looking at behavior? Are you looking at, is there a sequence that you evaluate one before the other? And then where do you go from there?
So to me, it's always been like a medley of numerous things, right? It's just first, how well can they tell our story? Just you and I, Jay, having our first conversation. Hey, Jay, what makes you unique about your recruiting service? Can we nail that conversation quickly? But then it's, okay, let's talk about each opportunity. And everyone wants to gravitate towards the opportunities that are so close to closing. That's great, those top 2 or 3 opportunities. But I want to hear more about like numbers 4 through 15 that you're working on. Do you have a good handle on those? Or do you have all of your kind of prayers for the first 3 of them? And then if those first 3 don't come in, you then start understanding from 4 through 15. Because when I start talking to salespeople and sales leaders about opportunities, that's going to teach me a lot about them. It's going to teach me about their process. It's going to teach me about how well they understand the client's needs. It's going to teach me how well do they really think, are they offering the right solution? Or are we just kind of taking a generic approach of their XYZ company and I'm talking to a CMO and this is what he or she wants? So I'm really looking for how well can they tailor their presentation based on their needs.
Got it. Okay. And is there a commonality or some sort of a thread between those who may be struggling and others who, who aren't? Like, in other words, and I guess what I'm getting at is how do you correct something if it is sort of, an attitude, mental adjustment, or behavior that needs to be changed?
So, I mean, to me, everything starts with making sure you really understand, what you need to find out from them. So whether that's their needs, their pain, their budget, their buying process, their signing authority.
Mm.
But so that's step one. And then step two, asking yourself, based upon their pains, can we do a really good job of helping them reduce those pains? And therefore, are we going to be in the primary driver's seat in this competitive opportunity? Or do we want to say realistically, you know what? This is going to be a difficult one because there's 2 or 3 other competitors that are just as good as us. So we really have to understand that opportunity. And I think the people that shine and consistently perform, that's exactly what they're doing. They have so much confidence to, even if they're talking to someone at the C level at a large company who just wants to dictate, I want to see a demo, I want to see price, I want to see all this. We're like, you know what? Time out. I don't want to waste your time or my time. I want to understand your needs because we might not be a good fit for you. For those people that can really do everything they can do to control the sales process, they're usually the most successful.
How do they learn that? In other words, that's a confidence game that you just alluded to, right?
Yes.
Is that something that is garnered over experience, just years of experience? Is there coaching? Is there training that can help them with that? How do you see that?
I think there's both. I think there's some people that are just, they naturally have that innate curiosity and confident blend that make them successful. But I do also think it can be a learned skill because I've seen plenty of people where you go, okay, we lost that opportunity. Let's really diagnose it and why. And we go back to, wait a minute, you know what? I didn't really understand something about it. I missed this step. I rushed to the demo. I rushed to pricing. I got caught up on their terms. And those people can learn from that. And a lot of them won't make that same mistake again. I also think, you know what? The first time someone has a lot of success with it, right? It's like success always makes people better. And you're like, wow, you know what? That was my first 6-figure deal, or that was my first multi-year contract. So why was I so successful? Okay, let me also diagnose that. And they see what they did. So I think people, once they start doing it successfully, they'll become more consistent at it.
Yeah, success can be contagious too, as well, right? You want more
Exactly.
of it. That dopamine hit of success, I guess, if you will.
And the other good thing is a lot of times, I mean, especially there's always good salespeople around you. And it doesn't matter their age, doesn't really matter their experience. So they can, we're all competitive. We don't want to see our names at the middle or the bottom of the list. So a lot of the good salespeople that I know have gone to their fellow salespeople and said, hey, if you don't mind, talk to me. Why did we win that deal? Not product, but what did you do from a sales skill standpoint to help you put ourselves into that competitive advantage? Because a lot of times it's product or price, but a lot of times it's just sales skill.
Did you do that as a rep, or even now? Do you go to other people? Did you go to other people and say, what were you doing differently there that I didn't? If you ended up number 2 and somebody else ended number 1, or whatever, just give me a sense of that.
I still do it. I do it all the time. I've done it, here at Dun and Bradstreet, there's a lot of good sales leaders that, I've been here through the acquisition of Net Prospects, just about 6 years. And when I first joined Dun and Bradstreet, I reached out to a lot of sales leaders, found out about, what's made them successful, learned about the company, because I hadn't worked for that large of a company for a little while. So
Mm-hmm.
I had to be reminded of that.
Mm-hmm.
But then even then, there's, goodness, there's salespeople who have been selling some of our data for 25 plus years that I'm constantly asking them about, what do we need to know here? So no, I think everyone has to, if you're going to be successful in sales, you've always has to be inquisitive, both internally and externally.
What have you struggled when have you struggled? Have you gone through a period of time where maybe as a quarter or 2 quarters where Sean Mulvey wasn't exceeding expectations or you weren't the top rep? And if so, how did you sort of pull up the wheel, so to speak, and get going again?
I certainly have, right? I mean, who hasn't struggled in sales?
Right.
Um, a lot of the times when I look at it back on it now, I either myself individually or with my team, we chase that one or two large deals because we're like, wow, those two or three large deals come in, we're gonna have a massive quarter or a massive month. And guess what? They push.
Right.
And I didn't focus enough usually on those cases on what's my plan B, what's my plan C. And I probably, with the plan B, you can never replenish that two or three large deals, but at least you get a lot closer so you can make it at least a decent month or quarter, not a horrendous one.
And then you continually do that because once you've learned you've made that sort of mistake, I guess, if you will, or focusing on the elephant, not necessarily focusing on some of the others. From a tactical perspective, how do you balance that, right? In other words, because obviously the larger deals might take more time, more attention, more, because there's more stakeholders involved, because maybe you need more internal resource and those types of things. And then as a result, some of the other tier 2 deals, I guess, so to speak, don't get you time. So what's your advice for managing that?
You have to be diligent about pipeline and forecast. You really do. I mean, one example that I've done a lot of the times is I'll ask a salesperson right now to rank your top 10 deals. And they will immediately, again, want to talk about those top 2 or 3 deals. And I'll tell them, I don't care the dollar size, but number one is the one you feel the highest confidence is coming in. And when I go through it with them, the really good salespeople still have some level of confidence, even at like number 6 or 7 or 8. Because then I'm like, wow, they've got a pretty good pipeline. So even if those first 2 or 3 don't come in, we got stuff behind it. But then it tells me all of a sudden, if the salesperson just doesn't have good answers on numbers 4 through 10, then it's going, okay, I get it. Your top 3 are awesome, and we're going to help you close those. But let's also not lose sight on numbers 4 through 10. How can I help you there? And even if it's just reminding you that they're still there. So to me, that's the consistency that we want. I mean, you're good salespeople, you're good sales leaders. We just try to be consistent rather than just have that mountain valley ratio. Let's just continue to climb each quarter, each month.
We talked a lot about reps in general, but I'd like to talk a little bit about what you just alluded to, which is other managers, right? People who are managing reps. How is that different from going from frontline manager to now where you're at, where you're actually managing managers? And how do you are able to drive performance through those managers to get the team to do what they're doing?
Yeah, I was fortunate at MDR. There's a few people that have been doing it for quite some time. So what it allowed us to do is kind of have that good blend of, they walked me into the industry. They walked me into the unique MDR data sets. So I didn't have to worry about product. I didn't have to worry about any of that. I more could then have really good conversations around, okay, then how are we set up for success? How are we, how is the team set up? Are we set up the right way? Do we have the right people on the right accounts? So I feel like when I joined, we had that kind of good, basically marriage, because each side brought something to it, and it worked really well.
How do you know, like when you say, how is the team set up? Do we have the right people on the right accounts? What's the process that you go through to figure that out?
You kind of ask people, it's one of those things that where this worked well, some of these individuals have been leading these teams for years. So it
Mhm.
allowed me to go in from an outside person's perspective and say, look at it in a few different ways, whether it's, does someone have too many accounts, or are people's book sizes skewed more ways than others, or we should be more geographically aligned. But it allowed me to kind of point out to them some things that I've seen as just kind of a newer person, so then we can have that discussion. And then it allowed me to kind of get the education where they said, well, it was done for this reason, for these, it was done in the past for these reasons, and it allowed me to get myself more up to speed. To me also, I look at like the best sales leaders who have led me. They have that perfect blend of at times giving advice, giving recommendations, and sometimes they're very strong recommendations, but also saying, you know what, we're trying to put you in a place to succeed, and we want you to do well. Because I think that's all of us want, right? We don't want to be micromanaged. We don't want to be told what to do on a daily basis. We want to have support from individuals that are there to help us get better, either us or our teams. And I try to take that same approach, because I've had the last two people that have led me, that have been my leaders at Dun and Bradstreet, have just been awesome at that.
What are the indicators when you're having those conversations that says, maybe we do have too many, reps that have too many accounts, or maybe there is some rep misalignment? Like, what are some of the indicators that you're either listening to or have noticed?
Yeah, this year, I think, unfortunately, is such an abnormal year for that, because of some of the indicators, right? Like, we MDR, we sell all the way from these, if you and I want to start up a janitorial business and target schools just in Massachusetts, we would sell to that janitorial business, but then we sell all the way up to the largest companies in the United States as well. And so COVID kind of impacted everybody really differently. And then some organizations got funding um, to help the schools. So the indicators this year really had nothing to do with probably a normal year.
What about in the past? What about more broadly? Like, how do you break that down?
I think one thing that we look at is, you know, we can all be territorial salespeople, right? We don't like giving up territories, whether you're for new business and you don't want to give up your zip code or your state or your city, or if you're responsible for accounts, you don't want to give up any of those accounts. But I think what you really have to look back on it now is going, okay, what type of success has he or she had in that territory in the last 2 or 3 years? What type of, and success doesn't necessarily have to be what have they closed, but
Mhm.
also what does the pipeline look like? Like, have they maybe cracked that company in July? It might be a 9-month sales cycle. So absolutely, we got to keep that person on because we have a good chance to close something in Q1. Or, you know what, that person hasn't had success in 4 years. We have no pipeline. We don't have a good understanding of the org chart. They might have had org chart changes. And maybe it's a chance for us to put in someone new to see if they can, kind of crack into the business.
When there are so many variables that go into whether or not a territory or an individual is having success, how do you make that decision to make maybe it's a personnel change, maybe you do have to let somebody go? And then I guess I'll go a step further and say that, let's say for instance, if you're meeting with someone and you're interviewing them for a new position that you have, and maybe they experienced something similar where they had an enormous pipeline, but the last couple of quarters they came up short. Maybe they were 50, they were 60% of their number. How do you, um, I guess, you know, reason there and say, okay, this is someone who's sitting across from me that um, has the skills and behaviors, it seems to me, that could be successful. We just need to see if we can put them in a position to win. Or if they're you've seen them, right? You've been in the meetings with them, you're sitting down with them, trying to coach them, and they just aren't necessarily able to hit their number or exceed their number. How do you go about deducting all of that?
So especially in that latter case, it certainly shouldn't be a surprise after 90 days or 2 quarters. To me, one of the things that I'm always a fan of from a data standpoint is pipeline changes. Now, pipeline changes might be over a week, over 30 days, depending upon your sales cycle. But almost every single day, my pipeline should change because either I got good news, bad news, neutral news, but I got some news. So my Salesforce should always look a little bit different. And that's something that I look at closely. And in doing so, you're really going to start understanding the story of that person. Is why is that person struggling? Right? Are they that close? And literally you have faith because, again, go back to that stack rank of their top 10 deals and you think 8 of them feel really good. Then as a coach, all I'm trying to do is make him or her better and try to help them close those deals. And I'm having that type of conversation, trying to be a really upbeat conversation. Hey, you know what? I know you're struggling. I know you're probably not happy. You're not getting the commissions you want. I have full faith in you. I think, you have a great plan for these 8 deals. Let's focus on getting those in, and we'll absolutely have you back to where you expect to be. That's a totally different conversation than if you see every week or every month someone doesn't have pipeline changes. Their top 10 deals just aren't that strong. So a lot of times there, you're probably questioning, are they putting in the time, the activity to do it? Or are they maybe just waiting on that one large deal? And just like communicating in that other example is important, it's the same thing here. Hey, this is what I'm seeing. Your pipeline's reflecting that there's not a lot of changes. When we go through your top 10 deals, they're not that solid from a plan standpoint. How can I help you? And at the same time, at some point, it's almost as we want to have the conversation going, is this just not a good fit for you? And that does not necessarily mean with our company. Maybe they've been in outside sales and want to go back to inside sales. Maybe they want more strategic sales and they're only doing really high volume ones. I really do think there's some individuals that are just really good at all of those type of sales. And sometimes you just have to put them on the right team.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about the second part of that? What about if you don't have insights into all of that and you're sitting down with someone who, they were candid and they said, you know what, I struggled this last quarter or two. And obviously, usually what follows is the reason behind why they struggled. How do you, evaluate them in that particular situation?
Yeah, I think you still have to somehow get to data points, right? It's just too hard to get into like an emotional conversation. I think you want to get into data points of, hey, talk to me about some of those opportunities that you thought were close, or what opportunities did you lose? But I still think the best way to talk, to make it as black and white as possible, is to talk scenarios. And whatever scenario is the most appropriate, whether it's some of the places that are really high call volume, others really high from a demonstration standpoint, or like to me, it's always been for me pipeline development, pipeline change. And
First
so
I've heard of that. Yeah. Okay.
People can crank as many calls as they want. They can give as many demonstrations as they want. And there's some people give great demonstrations, but they don't have the great closing skills. So that's why I always first focus on really, what does your pipeline look like? What did your pipeline look like, again, 2 weeks ago? How's it different? And if it's not different, okay, is it just you don't want to do Salesforce Entry? Or is it something different?
Yeah, to me, that's fascinating because I think you mentioning about not wanting to do Salesforce Entry, I think without the pipeline changing, it shows to me anyways, based on what I'm hearing you say, it shows a lack of effort in a way, right? Because think about it, if they don't want to do any Salesforce Entry, that's really an effort thing, right? In other words, they've done the activity, but they just don't want to put the effort into put it into Salesforce to show that it's changed. That's number one. Number two, if they are waiting for that one big deal, let's just say, and maybe they're just sitting back and they're being, lazy. They're not putting in the effort with all the other, like you said, maybe 4 through 10 or something like that, and they're not making the call to find out that Shawns not interested, or Shawn needs to wait until Q1 or
Right.
something like that, right? So that's amazing. I like that because it's one thing to look at a rep's performance at the end of the quarter, or whether, or the end of the year, whatever it is, like these longer term sort of evaluations. But when you're looking at it in the pipeline, and you're seeing, okay, has this changed over the last week or 2 weeks or 30 days? Those are leading indicators to say, okay, there's a problem here. We need to fix it. And if it's not fixed, then it's probably, it's more of an effort thing than maybe anything else,
It is that. And I think it also gives you a good understanding of the overall, how are you looking for the future, right? Not every salesperson is going to be at their number every single quarter, but I can be like, wow, so-and-so is not going to have probably a great Q1, but I have 4 other people on the team that are really set up for a strong Q1. And it allows me to have that conversation with the person who's going to struggle. Go, look, I need you to bring in anything you can. The team has you for Q1. I now need you to help carry people for Q2 or Q3.
And you can see that probably, right? And
Correct.
What you were just saying, right? If their pipeline looks like it's strong, it's like, okay, good. They're going to be there for Q2 and 3, Q2 and Q3, where somebody else might not be.
Exactly.
Because maybe they had such a huge Q1, and yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that makes sense. Give me then the core competencies of, and you know what, forget about individual contributors for a second. Give me a sense of what the core competencies are of good managers, good leaders that you want to see, either during an evaluation while you're meeting them for an interview, or just as you're evaluating your own team to try to figure out, where certain members of your team should be.
Yeah, I think it a little bit, and maybe just because of the way I've always thought of it or have morphed into it, it's what's their mentality. And to me, my mentality, as mentioned, has always been, I think a good sales leader, it has to be a good coach. Like, how can I make that person be better every day? But I think that the other good qualities completely are, someone has to be trustworthy. They have to be reliable. They have to be dependable. Because you're really good salespeople, they try to do as much as they can on their own. So when they come to you, they need your help. So they need to rely on you that, you might not be able to stop immediately what you're doing, but you recognize that they're raising their hand, and can you help them out as quickly as possible, either directly or indirectly. So I think being dependable and reliable is huge. And then I also think it's just a really good communicator. It's, that person feels like, especially now when people are working from home and we can do video chats, and those are great, but they just feel like, okay, this person has my back. They're keeping me up to speed on what's going on. They communicate good, bad, and ugly. But I just think communication is just essential.
Let me ask you this: how has the, being fully distributed now, right, where people are more home than in the office, or maybe not in the office at all, how has, I know I shouldn't say how has that changed, but how have you managed all that, I guess, if you will? What are some of the things that you've done?
Yeah, so that was unique for me because at MDR, the team is, we got people from all the way from California to good number of people in Chicago, good number of people in Connecticut, down in North Carolina, all over. And in March, when I joined the team, I kind of did a role of my previous role in MDR, and it wasn't going to become really effective till April 1. But I found out there was a team meeting in March in Chicago. So I got out and got to visit like a third of the team in March. But after that, I haven't met any of them in person. I've talked to them, right? I've led calls. So it's just been one of those things that I think almost you have to try to communicate in multiple ways. You can't just communicate by email. You can't just communicate by chat or Teams. You got to do video conference. and most of us do the video conference as much as possible, which I think is great. I think it's also relaxed it, right? Because, a year ago, if you heard people's dog barking or whatever, you're all annoyed. Now it's like status quo of your daily life. But again, back to what I was talking about, communication, I just think it's finding different ways to communicate, both to the people, team members individually, as well as collectively as a team.
Yep, yep, for sure. Let's get into something that I call the rapid fire 5, which is essentially just 5 questions that I'll ask you. Give me 5 questions off the top of your head, and hopefully give people a chance to learn a little bit more about you.
Sure.
Well, first question is as it pertains to your team, and I'm sure people would be interested in learning about this. Are you hiring, and which positions are you hiring for?
We're not hiring right now, but
Okay.
that could always change.
Okay.
Dun and Bradstreet as a company, though, we are hiring throughout the country, so it's all right on our website.
Okay. What are you most excited about right now, either personally or professionally?
So personally, I'm glad I actually lost about 25 pounds during COVID.
Wow.
And I just felt like I was sitting around too much. I'm like, I had to do something. And so I did that great. And then I hit called it like a 4-week hiatus, and then got back on it in the last, very recently. So that's great because I just recognize when I work out, I have so much more energy. I'm more efficient with my time. So I'm pretty proud that I lost that weight during COVID. I'm now doing everything I can, not only to keep it off, but lose it a little bit more.
There you go. There you go. Are you exercising in the morning or afternoon, evening? What's your routine?
My routine mostly is in the morning because then otherwise I dread it. I'm like, oh, I don't want to do it. Or
Right.
so no, my goal is like this morning I did it at 6.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm the same way. What do you want to get better at right now?
Oh goodness. I mean, I could get better at so many things. Like I talked to you about at Dun and Bradstreet, we just did that value selling class. And that was we did it last year and was such a good reminder of just things either I hadn't thought about in years. So I would say I'd always try to get better at my sales process, my sales methodology, my communication, being a dad, right? Like everything.
What keeps you motivated?
I think all of that really, my family does. I think I have a lot of good, I've always been personally driven. So I'm very self-motivated. So I think what keeps me motivated is just my inner drive that I keep on wanting to do well.
You know where that comes from? I feel I have that same thing, but like I guess the next level is why. Like why do you have that inner drive? Where is it from early childhood? Is it
I think it's my father.
Hmm.
My father, it's interesting at age of they had me very late. They had me in their 40s, which was odd then.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few years later, he had a PhD in biology, and he just wasn't happy in life professionally. So he became a lawyer. So like 43, 44, started practicing law and did it all the way until in his 70s.
Wow.
So I do think it's a lot of my father's personal drive.
Very interesting. Okay. And can you share a piece of advice or a tool that you use to help you stay productive?
It's a really good question because I feel like I'm constantly tinkering with whether I'm using notebooks, whether I'm using notes in Outlook, whether I'm using my phone. I have lately actually it's kind of interesting you just asked this. I just recently, I would say in the last month, I've been using the notes functionality on my phone a lot more. Because otherwise I'm always looking for where did I record that in a certain notebook? My daughter, for example, is having some hip issues. And when we went to the doctor last week, I put all the notes there, which was great because then when I had to get the referral, it was all there. So it's interesting that I'm switching, I think, even more to using my mobile for notes more so than ever in the last, few months.
I'm smiling because that's my key as well. I literally have folders now. I geeked out over it. So I have folders. I even have a folder that's called New Jersey. So and like in the because that's where my in-laws are. And
Right.
in one of the items in the folder, it reminds me which exit the McDonald's is in Connecticut.
Yep.
Right. Just something like that. Because I'm like, wow, this is crazy. So yeah, I have folders for a whole bunch of stuff in there, like even like the kids' Christmas list, like
Yeah,
birthday,
exactly.
you
Yes.
know?
Because that's how they communicate.
Yes, yes, that's exactly it. And my phone is always with me, so it's just like the natural thing to do is to put everything in my notes on my phone. So
No doubt.
absolutely. Shawn, one other question, which is how can folks get in touch with you to either say thank you, perhaps ask a follow-up question that I didn't ask, all that wonderful stuff.
Yeah, I would take any of that. I'm on LinkedIn, obviously. My email is first initial, middle initial, so scmulvey@gmail.com. Anyone wants to email me there, happy to help people in any way. I mean, like I said, I am proud to be in sales now for 26 years. So if there's anything I can do to help people in any way, I'm more than happy to help.
And that's Mulvey with an E, Mulvey.
Mulvey.
Yes,
Yep.
that's right. Shawn Mulvey, thank you for going over quota.
Anytime, Jay. Great seeing you, my friend.
Thank you, everybody. I'm cueing the music.